Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I always believed that being a police officer meant protecting the people you love the most. Then no matter how bad the world got, as long as I could put on that uniform and keep my family safe, everything else would be worth it. I never realized the real threat wasn't outside my home, it was inside it. While you're here, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to know. Sarah and I had been together for 10 years, married for 7. We had the kind of relationship people called solid, dependable. She was never the overly affectionate type, but I never thought that mattered. Love isn't just about passion, it's about loyalty. Or at least, that's what I told myself whenever she pulled away, whenever she rolled her eyes at my jokes, or dismissed my bad days at work like they were inconveniences rather than moments when I needed her. At first, I blamed myself. Long shifts, late nights, canceled plans. Being married to a cop wasn't easy, and I knew it. But I always tried. I always showed up when it counted. Apparently, that wasn't enough. It started small, the way most things do. She developed an interest in my job that hadn't existed before. For years, she had barely asked about my cases, never seemed to care about the details of my shifts. But suddenly, she wanted to know everything. What the department was like, who I worked with, what went on during night patrols. At first, I was happy. Finally, she seemed to want to be part of my world. Then she brought up the ride-along program. "I think it'd be fun," she said one night over dinner, twirling her fork between her fingers. "You always say how crazy things get in the city at night. I want to see it for myself." I laughed. "Sarah, you've spent years complaining that my job is dangerous. Now you suddenly want front row seats." She shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I just want to understand it more. You always talk about wanting us to be closer. This is me trying." I hesitated, the logic not quite adding up, but I didn't push. When someone tells you they want to be part of your life, you don't question it. You just accept it. I should have questioned it. The first time she went on a ride-along, she texted me all night, excited, engaged, full of energy in a way I hadn't seen in years. "It was amazing," she gushed the next morning. "I had no idea what you guys actually go through." For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. But the changes kept coming. She started staying out later. Even on nights, she wasn't riding along. When I asked, she brushed it off, saying she was grabbing drinks with some of the guys from the department. That didn't sit right with me. Sarah had never been interested in hanging around cops before. Then there was Matt. He was a rookie, one of the new guys in the department. I had trained him, shown him the ropes, trusted him. He was sharp, eager to prove himself, always looking for my approval. At first, I thought he looked up to me. Then I noticed how he looked at Sarah. She laughed more around him, touched his arm when she talked. Their conversations were full of inside jokes that I wasn't part of. And when I asked about it, she acted like I was crazy. "Matt's just a kid," she said, rolling her eyes. "He sees you like a mentor, which means he sees me like family. Don't be paranoid." Paranoid. That was the word she used every time I got too close to the truth. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was tired, overworked, that the stress of the job was making me see things that weren't there. But late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her phone vibrate on her nightstand. And in the morning, her ride-along shifts would conveniently line up with Matt's. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at a family gathering, the kind where everyone drinks too much and stories from the past get dragged back into the light. Sarah had been in a mood all day, short with me, rolling her eyes at every little thing I said. My brother-in-law was telling a story about some dumb thing he had done when he was younger, and I chimed in with a joke. Nothing offensive, nothing cruel, just a small, harmless comment. But Sarah turned to me, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Wow, Adam, you're really full of yourself, huh?" The room went silent. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. My father cleared his throat. My sister looked down at her drink. Sarah leaned back in her chair, taking a slow sip of wine, like she had done nothing wrong. "You always do this," she said, shaking her head. "Act like you're the smartest guy in the room, like everyone should just hang on to your every word." I felt the heat rise in my chest. She wasn't joking. She wasn't teasing. She was belittling me in front of everyone. And the worst part? No one said a word. Because this wasn't the first time. I swallowed hard, forcing a tight smile. Guess that makes two of us, then. Her eyes flashed. She wasn't expecting me to push back. That was the moment I knew. Something inside me snapped into place. The uneasy feeling I had been ignoring for months solidified into something real. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't being paranoid. Something was happening. That night, as we drove home in silence, I knew two things for certain. One, my wife didn't love me. Two, I was going to find out exactly what she was hiding. I didn't sleep that night. Sarah was curled up beside me, completely at ease, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't embarrassed me in front of my entire family. Like she hadn't spent the last few months pulling away from me piece by piece. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet hum of the fan, my mind racing. I replayed every moment in my head. The sudden interest in my job, the way she had attached herself to Matt, the way she dismissed my concerns, making me feel like a paranoid idiot. But I wasn't an idiot. I knew when something wasn't right. I had spent my entire career reading people, analyzing body language, catching criminals in lies. So why had I ignored all the signs in my own home? By the time the first light of morning crept through the blinds, I had made a decision. No more doubting myself. No more excuses. I was going to find out the truth. Sarah was already up by the time I got out of bed, standing in front of the mirror, fixing her hair. She looked at me through the reflection, her expression unreadable. "You seemed quiet last night," she said casually, running her fingers through her hair. I forced a tired smile. "Just thinking." She raised an eyebrow. "About what?" I shrugged, stepping past her toward the bathroom. "Work." She didn't press. That alone told me everything I needed to know. She didn't care. If she truly loved me, she would have noticed that something was off. She would have apologized for the way she had treated me at the party. But instead, she carried on like nothing had changed. Later that morning, while she was out running errands, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, doing what I did best, gathering intel. First, I checked her phone records. She wasn't stupid enough to leave incriminating texts for me to find, but call logs? Those she hadn't thought to erase. Matt's number was there, over and over again, late at night, during the hours I was on shift. Next, I checked the department schedule. As expected, Sarah had been strategic with her ride-along shifts. Every single one of them had been with Matt. Not once had she requested to ride with another officer. Then, I went further. I pulled up the GPS logs for Matt's patrol car. The system tracked every route, every stop, every moment he was on duty. And that's when I saw it, a pattern. Certain locations were being visited that weren't on any official report. Places that had no connection to ongoing investigations. Empty parking lots, abandoned buildings, residential streets with no calls assigned. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. I clenched my fists, my pulse hammering in my ears. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was real. That night, I played my part. I acted normal, pretended I was too exhausted from work to pay attention to her texting, her scrolling, her constant smirking at something on her phone. She thought she had me fooled. She thought I was still in the dark. But I wasn't. I was watching, waiting, planning. 2 days later, I took it a step further. I installed a GPS tracker in Matt's squad car. Not through the department system. This was my own device, small and discreet, hidden where no one would find it. I linked it to my phone, setting up notifications for every time the vehicle left its designated patrol route. Then I set up cameras. Not in our house. Sarah wasn't that careless. But in our garage. The place where she thought she was safe. The place where she always lingered a little too long when coming home from her rides. If she was meeting him here, I would know. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, nothing. The third night, I got the alert. I was sitting in my patrol car, parked outside a convenience store, sipping bad coffee when my phone buzzed. Unauthorized stop detected. I clicked the notification, my heart pounding. The tracker had picked up movement in a private lot near an old warehouse, nowhere near his patrol route. I took a slow breath. This was it. I switched to the garage feed and saw Sarah standing there, looking at her phone, waiting. A minute later, Matt's car pulled up. The footage was grainy in the dim lighting, but I didn't need HD resolution to know what was happening. She slid into the passenger seat, looked around like a criminal checking for cops. Ironic, then leaned toward him. I closed my eyes for half a second, forcing down the rage threatening to take over. Then I hit record. I didn't move, didn't react. I just watched, because now I had everything I needed. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The video was still playing on my phone, but I didn't need to watch it again. The images were burned into my brain. Sarah, my wife, sitting in his squad car, looking at him the way she used to look at me, leaning in, smiling, laughing. It was worse than I imagined. She wasn't just cheating, she was enjoying it. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had buried the anger deep inside. This wasn't the time to explode. I needed control. I needed to be smart. Sarah was in the kitchen when I walked in, her phone in one hand, a glass of wine in the other. She glanced up, flashing me a smile like she hadn't just spent the last hour tangled up with someone else in a patrol car. "Hey," she said casually. "Long shift?" I forced a nod. "Yeah, same as usual." She went back to scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that I knew everything. I walked past her, heading straight for the bathroom. Locking the door behind me, I pulled out my phone and opened the video again. Watching them felt like self-inflicted torture, but I needed to see it. I needed to feel it. Every time she had dismissed me, every time she had rolled her eyes at me, every time she had made me feel like I was the one losing my mind, this was the proof that I had been right all along. I played the video on loop, letting the betrayal sink in. The sound of her voice, the way she laughed with him. It had never been me. I had spent months blaming myself, thinking maybe if I worked less, if I paid more attention, if I did more, she would be different. But she wouldn't, because it had never been about me. It had always been about her. And now she was going to pay for it. The next day, I took the footage and backed it up to multiple locations. My personal laptop, a secure cloud storage account, a flash drive I hid in my locker at work. This wasn't just insurance. This was a weapon. I spent the next week gathering everything. More GPS logs, more footage, every call she made to Matt, every shift they worked together. I wanted every detail. And then I set my trap. "Hey, babe," I said one evening while we were having dinner. "What do you think about celebrating our anniversary at that new steakhouse downtown?" She barely looked up from her plate. "Anniversary's not for a few weeks." "I know," I said, "but it's impossible to get a table there unless you book way in advance." Thought I'd make reservations now. She hesitated for half a second before forcing a smile. "Yeah, sure. That sounds nice." I knew exactly why she was hesitating. She was trying to figure out how to fit me into her schedule. I made the reservation anyway. A few days later, I overheard her on the phone. "Yeah, I can still make it work. He's got this dinner planned, but I'll figure something out." I didn't need to hear the rest. She was planning to cheat on me on our anniversary. I clenched my fists, inhaled slow and deep, and smiled to myself. Perfect. I spent the next week making sure everything was set. I wasn't just going to expose her. I was going to ruin her. The plan was simple. She thought we were going to have a fancy anniversary dinner, just the two of us. What she didn't know was that her affair partner's entire department would be at a banquet that same night, one where Matt was set to receive a promotion. It was going to be his moment. The night he was recognized as a rising star in law enforcement. The night his fiancée, the woman he had been stringing along while sneaking around with my wife, would be standing by his side, beaming with pride. And I was going to destroy it all. I watched Sarah closely over the next few days. She was completely oblivious, too busy balancing her double life to notice the way I studied her. The way I measured every reaction, every lie she told, every excuse she made for where she was going and what she was doing. She thought she was untouchable. She had no idea that in just a matter of days, everything she had built was going to come crashing down around her. The morning of the banquet, I kissed her on the cheek as I left for work like nothing was wrong. "See you tonight," I said. She smiled. "Yeah, tonight." She was still smiling as I walked out the door. By the end of the night, she wouldn't be. I spent the entire day calm, focused, methodical. While Sarah texted away, making whatever excuses she needed to keep her night open, I made the final preparations. Everything had to be perfect. There was no room for error, no second chances. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to expose her in a way that would leave her nowhere to hide. The banquet was set to begin at 7, an evening dedicated to honoring officers who had gone above and beyond in their service. Matt was being recognized for his dedication to the force, and his fiancée would be sitting front and center, completely unaware that the man she was about to celebrate had been sneaking around with my wife. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. Sarah had no idea that I had canceled our anniversary dinner. She still believed we were going to that steakhouse. That was the beauty of the plan. I didn't need to stop her from seeing him tonight. I just needed to make sure she was exactly where I wanted her when the truth came out. I got ready slowly, taking my time. I chose a suit that I knew Sarah liked, the one she always said made me look put together. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't put together. I was falling apart. But I wouldn't let her see that. Not yet. Not until it was too late. At 6:30, I walked downstairs. Sarah was already dressed, wearing the red dress she knew turned heads. She looked up from her phone and smiled. "Wow," she said, tilting her head. "You actually cleaned up nice." I smiled back. "Figure I should look good for tonight." She grabbed her purse, barely paying attention to me. "We should get going if we don't want to be late." I nodded, but I didn't move. She frowned. "What?" I checked my watch, pretending to think. "Actually, there's been a change of plans." Her brows furrowed. "What are you talking about?" I pulled my phone from my pocket and tapped the screen. Within seconds, the TV behind me flickered on, playing the footage from my garage. Her smile froze. On the screen, her, leaning into Matt's patrol car, laughing, touching his arm like she used to touch mine, then sliding into the passenger seat. Then, nothing I needed to describe. She inhaled sharply. "Adam, what the—" I held up a hand, silencing her. "Not yet. Just watch." The next clip played. GPS logs showing unauthorized stops. Calls between her and Matt, all conveniently made while I was working late. The timestamps told the whole story. Sarah turned pale, eyes darting between me and the screen. This is insane. You've been spying on me." I exhaled slowly. I knew something was off. I just didn't want to believe it. "But you made it pretty easy." She folded her arms, trying to regain control. "This doesn't mean anything. Matt and I don't." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Don't lie to me. Not now. You and Matt thought you were so careful, but you made mistakes. And you know what the best one was?" She shook her head slightly, swallowing hard. "You scheduled your little ride-along on the same night as the banquet," I said. "Matt was supposed to be working. Instead, he was with you. And tonight, while everyone at that banquet is celebrating him, I'll be there too, with this footage." Her eyes widened. "You wouldn't." I smirked. "You think?" She rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Adam, please. Let's talk about this. We can fix this." I stared at her. The desperation in her voice wasn't for me. It was for herself. For the life she had built on lies. The reputation she was about to lose. "There's nothing to fix," I said. "You made sure of that." I stepped back, pulling my arm free. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have somewhere to be." I turned and walked out the door, leaving her standing there, breathless and broken. By the time I arrived at the banquet, the event was already in full swing. Officers in dress uniforms. Families and friends raising glasses. A stage set up with a podium, where department heads took turns praising the men and women who had gone above and beyond. I found Matt's fiancée near the front, smiling as she watched the ceremony unfold. She had no idea that her world was about to shatter. I approached her slowly. "Excuse me." She turned, her smile polite but confused. "Yes." I pulled out a flash drive and placed it in her palm. "Before they call Matt on stage, you're going to want to watch this." Her brows knitted together. "I don't understand. You will," I said. "Trust me." Then I stepped back, folded my arms, and waited for everything to come crashing down. The moment stretched between us, thick with confusion. Matt's fiancée glanced down at the flash drive in her hand, then back up at me, her lips parting as if to ask another question. But before she could speak, an officer stepped up to the podium and cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. It is my honor to introduce this year's recipient of the Officer of the Year Award, someone who has shown exceptional dedication to this department and to the community we serve." Applause rippled through the room. I turned my head slightly, watching as Matt straightened his jacket, running a hand through his hair. He was trying to look composed, but I saw the way his eyes flicked toward the entrance, scanning. He was looking for her. A sick kind of satisfaction settled in my chest. He thought Sarah was going to be here, sitting in the crowd, watching him be celebrated. He had no idea she was at home, watching everything fall apart. I leaned in close to his fiancée. "Play it now." She hesitated. "What now?" Something in my voice must have struck her because she didn't ask again. She turned, excused herself from the group, and hurried toward the back of the banquet hall, where a table full of department laptops sat unattended. I didn't move. I wanted her to see it first. The speaker continued. "Officer Matt has consistently gone above and beyond his duties. His commitment to the force has been unwavering, and his contributions have made this city safer." Then the gasping started. It was a slow wave, rippling from the back of the room forward. Matt's fiancée stood frozen, a hand covering her mouth as the footage played out on a laptop screen in front of her. A second later, her head snapped up, eyes locking onto Matt like a predator spotting prey. Matt noticed her expression before he noticed the shift in the room. He frowned, his posture stiffening. Then someone near the back stood up abruptly. "What the hell is this?" Another voice, sharper. "Is that?" "No way." Matt shifted, confusion morphing into unease. He still didn't know, but I did. The flash drive hadn't just contained footage. It contained everything, every text, every call log, every GPS coordinate that proved he wasn't just a bad cop. He was dirty in a way no badge could excuse. Matt took a step forward, as if to hurry the ceremony along before things unraveled, but it was too late. His fiancée was already marching toward the stage, her heels clicking like gunfire against the polished floor. "Is this a joke?" she demanded, holding up the laptop for everyone to see. "Because if it is, it's the most disgusting thing I've ever seen." Matt's face went pale. Someone in the crowd murmured, "What's on the screen?" I let the moment stretch. Let him feel it. Then, in the silence, I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Your Officer of the Year has been a little busy off-duty." The whispers turned into full-blown chaos. I took a slow step forward, feeling every eye in the room shift toward me. While this department has been celebrating his commitment, he's been using his patrol car for something else entirely. Matt started shaking his head. "That's not true. This is check the GPS logs." I cut in smoothly. "Or better yet, ask my wife. She's been very familiar with his schedule." That was it. The moment the lie cracked and collapsed. His fiancée turned, eyes blazing, and before Matt could get another word out, she slapped him across the face so hard the sound echoed through the hall. "You piece of trash," she spat. "I should have known. I should have." She choked on the words, her face twisting in fury and heartbreak. Matt was frantic now, looking around the room for support. But he found none. Officers were murmuring amongst themselves, higher-ups exchanging glances that were anything but pleased. I turned toward the stage, where the department head stood frozen, microphone still in hand. "I think you might want to reconsider that award," I said. That was when the chief stepped forward. Silence fell. The chief didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. That was worse. "Matt," he said, voice low but carrying across the room. "Step down." Matt's mouth opened. "Sir, I won't ask again." Matt froze. Then, slowly, he took a step back. The moment he did, the decision was final. The department wouldn't defend him. They wouldn't sweep it under the rug. Not with the evidence I had just handed them. Not with an entire room of witnesses seeing the moment his career ended. I took a slow breath, the weight in my chest finally beginning to lift. Matt was done. Sarah would be next. I drove home in silence, letting the night settle around me. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but beneath it, there was a strange kind of calm. The damage was done. Matt had been humiliated in front of his entire department. His fiancée had walked out on him, and the whispers I heard on my way out told me the investigation had already begun. He wouldn't be wearing a badge for much longer. Now, there was only one thing left to deal with. Sarah. I pulled into the driveway, noticing the lights in the house were still on. Good. She had been waiting. I stepped out of the car, took a slow breath, and walked inside. She was sitting on the couch, clutching a half-empty glass of wine, her phone beside her. When I shut the door behind me, she jerked her head up, her expression a mix of anger and desperation. Where the hell have you been? I tossed my keys on the counter. Banquet. Her fingers tightened around the glass. You. She exhaled sharply, standing. You canceled our anniversary dinner and went to his banquet instead? I let her words hang in the air for a moment before I met her eyes. You were never going to that dinner with me. Her face twitched. I heard you on the phone, I continued. You were trying to work around my plans. Figure out a way to sneak in a few hours with him before you had to come home and pretend to be my wife. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. You're being dramatic. I didn't even blink. I played the footage tonight, Sarah, in front of his entire department. His fiancée was there. His boss was there. They saw everything. The color drained from her face so fast, it was almost impressive. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Matt's done, I said, stepping closer. His career? Over. He's probably getting fired as we speak. And you? I tilted my head. You're next. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Adam, please. I cut her off. Don't try to talk your way out of this. Don't tell me it was a mistake, or that it didn't mean anything, or that you were going to end it. I don't care. Her eyes glistened. We can fix this. I almost laughed. Fix what? The fact that you used my uniform, my badge, my career as a cover for your affair. That you let me come home every night thinking I was just being paranoid, that it was all in my head. She sniffed, wiping at her face. It wasn't like that. And what was it like, Sarah? She opened her mouth. Closed it. I shook my head. That's what I thought. She took a step closer, reaching for my arm. Adam, I was stupid, okay? I made a mistake. I never meant to hurt you. I stepped back. You didn't just hurt me, Sarah. You humiliated me. You used our marriage as a joke, as a cover. She inhaled sharply, her desperation shifting into something sharper. So what? You just get to ruin my life now? I raised an eyebrow. I didn't ruin your life. You did. She let out a shaky breath, her jaw tightening. You don't have to do this. We can work through it. No, you can work through it. I turned, walking toward the stairs. I'm done. Panic flickered across her face. What do you mean you're done? I reached into my jacket, pulled out a thick stack of papers, and tossed them on the coffee table. Her breath caught. What is this? Divorce papers. Silence. The room felt still. Sarah stared at the papers, her chest rising and falling unevenly. You already had these drawn up? Days ago. Her lips trembled. So that's it? Just like that? I shrugged. Just like that. Her hands clenched into fists. You can't just throw this all away. I exhaled slowly, looking at her for what felt like the first time in years. Sarah, you already did. Her shoulders shook, but I wasn't sure if it was from rage or the realization that she had finally lost. This is my house, too. I smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. Not for much longer. She let out a strangled laugh. You think you're just going to walk away from this with everything? That you're going to win? I tilted my head. Oh, I know I'm going to win. Because I have everything I need. The footage. The proof. The fact that you used police property for your affair. I gestured toward the divorce papers. This case is already closed. Her expression cracked. For the first time, I saw something other than arrogance in her eyes. I saw fear. You should probably start looking for a new place, I said. Because after this, you're on your own. I turned away, walking up the stairs, leaving her standing there in the wreckage of everything she had built on lies. I barely slept that night. Not because I was second-guessing anything. I wasn't, but because my mind was still wired from everything that had happened. The weight of betrayal, the rush of revenge, the finality of those divorce papers sitting on the table downstairs. Sarah had stayed up too, pacing the house, slamming cabinets, making calls that ended in hushed arguments. She was scrambling, trying to find a way to salvage what little power she had left. But there was no escape from this. Not this time. By morning, I was up before the sun, dressed, and ready to leave before she even came downstairs. I had no interest in another fight, and I definitely didn't care about whatever desperate plea she had rehearsed overnight. I had a meeting with my lawyer first thing, and nothing she said was going to change the fact that today was the beginning of the end. As I stepped toward the door, I heard her voice behind me. Adam. I didn't turn. What? She exhaled sharply. We need to talk. I pushed open the door. We really don't. She hurried forward, blocking the exit. You're not even going to listen? I leveled her with a stare. I listened to you lie to me for months. I listened to you make a fool of me in front of everyone. I listened to you pretend that you weren't sleeping with my coworker in the back of a squad car. I think I've done more than enough listening. Her face flushed red. So that's it? You just get to decide how this ends. I smiled, slow and sharp. Yes. I stepped around her and walked out the door without another word. The law office was quiet when I arrived, the kind of professional silence that made everything feel 10 times more serious than it already was. My lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Evelyn, greeted me with a firm handshake and motioned for me to sit. You came prepared, she said, flipping through the documents I had brought. Proof of the affair, the texts, the GPS logs, the footage. I didn't want to leave any room for doubt. She nodded approvingly. Good. This will make things easier. She laid out my options. The infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement meant that Sarah wouldn't be walking away with much, if anything. I'd keep the house, my pension, and full control of the assets we shared. She would be lucky if she could afford a studio apartment by the time this was over. And if she tries to fight it, I asked. Evelyn leaned back, smirking. Let her. We have more than enough to bury any argument she throws at us. If she has a lawyer worth anything, they'll tell her to settle. I exhaled slowly, nodding. Make it happen. By the time I got home, Sarah was on the phone, pacing the living room. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the panic beneath it. Yes, I understand. No, there has to be a way around that. A pause. Her shoulders stiffened. What do you mean there isn't? I crossed my arms, waiting. She turned and saw me standing there, her eyes narrowing. She ended the call without another word and tossed her phone onto the couch. I assume that was your lawyer, I said. She crossed her arms. This is insane, Adam. You can't just take everything from me. I raised an eyebrow. Can't I? She let out a bitter laugh. You want to destroy me? Fine. But don't pretend this is justice. This is revenge. I shrugged. Call it whatever you want. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. You know what? You're pathetic. You couldn't keep up with me, so you set me up to fail. You wanted me to be small, to be trapped in this boring marriage, and the second I wanted more, you turned into this vindictive. I cut her off with a sharp laugh. Wanted more? Sarah, you weren't looking for more. You were looking for an excuse. And you found one. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't done. You weren't trapped. You weren't suffering. You were just a selfish, entitled liar who thought she could have everything without consequences. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. But there are always consequences. Her jaw tightened, her breath coming quicker. I won't let you ruin me. I smirked. Sweetheart, you already ruined yourself. She turned on her heel, storming up the stairs. A door slammed, shaking the walls. I stood there for a long moment, letting the silence settle. Then I picked up her phone from the couch, turned it over in my hand, and placed it face down on the table. She had no idea just how much further she had to fall. The house felt emptier than it ever had. Maybe it was because I had finally stopped pretending there was anything left worth saving. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was liberating. Sarah had barely spoken to me since the meeting with the lawyers. She tried a few times, switching tactics between anger, guilt, and desperation, but none of it worked. She knew she was losing. A few days after the initial divorce filing, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes bloodshot like she had spent the last hour crying. I signed, she said, pushing them toward me. I didn't move. Good. Took you long enough. She flinched at my cold tone. Adam, can we just talk for a second? I pulled out a chair, sitting across from her, but I didn't touch the papers. Talk. She licked her lips, eyes darting to the side before she looked back at me. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. I said nothing. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I never thought we'd end like this. I leaned back, crossing my arms. How exactly did you think we'd end, Sarah? With me finding out years from now? With you sneaking around until Matt got bored and moved on? Or were you hoping I'd be too much of an idiot to ever figure it out? Her face twisted in frustration. That's not fair. I laughed. Not fair? Sarah, you turned our marriage into a joke. You threw everything away. I'm just making sure you face the consequences. She exhaled sharply, rubbing her hands over her face. I didn't mean to hurt you. I shook my head. You keep saying that like it means something. You did it anyway. She looked down at the papers. So that's it? We sign and never speak again? I didn't answer. Her voice cracked. Did you ever love me? I met her gaze and held it. Yeah, I said. I did. She blinked rapidly, nodding. Right? I stood up, grabbing the papers. But that doesn't matter anymore. She didn't stop me when I walked away. By the end of the week, it was official. The house was mine, the divorce finalized, and Sarah was left scrambling for a place to live. She packed up what little she had left and moved into some cheap apartment across town. I didn't ask where. I didn't care. One night, I got a text from one of the guys at the department. Matt's out. Fired. Turns out you weren't the only one he was screwing over. I smirked, locking my phone and tossing it onto the counter. Good. The damage was permanent. A month passed, and I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. The weight that had been sitting on my chest for so long was gone. I went back to work. I hit the gym more. I started living again. I wasn't just the guy who got cheated on anymore. I was me again. One evening, I grabbed a drink with some buddies. The conversation turned to my divorce, and one of them raised a brow. You ever think about dating again? I laughed, shaking my head. Not yet. I like the quiet. Another guy smirked. Yeah, but that won't last forever. Maybe not. But for now, I was exactly where I wanted to be. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like, and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.